It can be hard to chat with your children when you're not all up on the language that's being used to describe gender nowadays. And of course, what exactly is gender anyway? Here's a quick primer on how language is being used in Nova Scotia in 2017. And of course, I say that and situate this because language changes rapidly. So what I record today may very well in fact be altered, a year from now. Often the language evolves as we learn better ways to describe complex experiences. Getting it wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person, as long as you're willing to get it right. In fact, it can be challenging to remember that gender stereotypes have been learned, and it takes a lot of effort sometimes to unlearn them or to reflect on them. Another point you should remember is that different people are going to use these terms in ways that work for them. So these terms aren't about labeling other people so much as just talking about terms that people have found helpful in describing their experiences. Each person is an expert in what works for them as they journey through life, and as they develop, they may discover other language that works better for them. So let's start on some common terms. Our biological sex is our physical makeup, or what people see. It's basically determined by a doctor at birth who looks at the genitals and says either it's a girl or a boy. Biological sex is made up of things like hormones, chromosomes, internal reproductive organs, and secondary sex characteristics, aka the things that tend to come out in puberty like breasts or facial hair. Obviously, these things are not all tested at birth to determine our biological sex, which is where things start getting a little more complicated. Nature, as you can imagine, is complex and doesn't always follow the clear categories we assign to it. Some babies are born outside the male-female binary, and years ago such babies would have been called hermaphrodites, but that term has fallen out of favor and is really no longer considered appropriate by most people. A better term today is intersex, which describes individuals whose bodies are more complex than just male or just female. It may mean a person has one ovary or one testicle. It may mean different hormones. This is perfectly natural, and it's seen in other species as well. It's thought that being intersex is about as common as being a natural redhead. Some folks argue that our biological sex also includes our gender identity. Others separate biological sex from gender identity, and it can be hard to untangle sort of those inborn gender traits and those that we've learned as we've grown up. Until more research is done, we'll have to leave gender identity as something that may be biological in nature. And I say that because it's such a deep part of who we are and how we see ourselves in this world. Put in the simplest way possible, gender identity is how you feel. It can be the same sex that you were assigned at birth, which makes you cisgender. Thus, someone assigned girl at birth feels as though she has a gender identity that can best be described as that of a girl or woman. If that gender identity that you feel is different from what the doctor described at birth, you may be transgender, or a number of other terms that fall underneath that transgender umbrella. These internal gender identities are not always visible on the outside and cannot be assumed from things like dress or behavior. And it also can't be assumed from the secondary sex characteristics that arise during puberty, like beards or breasts. Some argue that being trans is a disconnect between what someone is on the inside and how people perceive them. Transsexual is another term that some people use, although this tends to be an older term and some individuals may find it a bit clinical. It tends to relate more to treatment of some kind, whether that be hormones or surgery. Some people use that term instead of transgender. Other people use just the word trans. There are many terms people who are transgender may use to describe themselves. They may want to indicate what sex they were assigned at birth. So some people will use, for example, male to female or trans woman. Others may not want to include this and just simply go by woman. It's really up to the person. Gender identity may also fall outside the gender binary, which is the concept that women and men are two separate and opposite things. However, nature isn't very good to sticking to the categories that we assign it. So some people have the qualities of man or woman inside, or neither. So some folks are using terms like gender non-conforming, gender fluid, androgynous, genderqueer, or gender variant, or some other term to reflect they're not part of that gender binary of just man or woman. So if you hear one of these terms, remember that it does mean different things to different people, but you can assume that the person does not identify with gender as it's traditionally been described in Western European societies. Someone who is agender often considers themselves outside the two traditional genders of man and woman. A bigender person may see themselves as both man or woman. Gender normative or gender straight are just terms that are used to describe someone that falls in line with society's expectations of gender. It's worth noting that gender itself is a complex word that really only came out in the second half of the 20th century. Originally, it was thought that biological sex and gender identity were all the same thing, at least in Western European society. So before that, people didn't really acknowledge gender for what it is, which is a complex interplay of the human body and brain with society's expectations of how that gender should behave and live. However, not all societies are so restrictive when it comes to gender. Many indigenous societies that were in North America pre-contact acknowledged there was a third gender that was made up of the qualities of both man and woman, and there are some other concepts as well. Many indigenous groups came together and came up with the word two-spirit to describe this long legacy that indigenous peoples have had with more than just those two genders. Our Western society often describes gender in ways that aren't really based in biology. So there's no reason why girls should wear pink, or why they should wear makeup or skirts. These are just things that our society has determined that girls do. And that's probably why some people have argued that gender is a performance. Speaking of performance, gender expression is used to describe a person's outward appearance. So that's often made up of things like hair, makeup, clothing, but it also includes the social behaviors typically associated with that gender, such as ways of speaking and moving. Many times people's gender expression is similar to their gender. However, it doesn't necessarily always have to be the same. And some people may prefer to have a gender expression that's more neutral or androgynous, aka some qualities of both man and woman. Others may have a gender expression that differs from their gender. So for example, a drag queen is a man who dresses up as a woman for performance. His gender expression at that time is that of a woman, but he doesn't necessarily see himself as a woman. When we talk of gender being a performance, gender expression can really be viewed as that performance. So that's why a drag queen puts on bright makeup, heels, and dresses. These are viewed as the hallmarks of the performance of being a woman. A cross-dresser, on the other hand, is simply someone who dresses as another gender, but in contrast to being a drag king or queen, it's not about performance. Years ago, the term transvestite was used to describe such individuals, but that term isn't really being used much anymore. So what else should you know about gender? Well, sexual reassignment surgery or sex change surgery are out-of-date phrases. Better terms today include gender confirming or gender affirming surgery. The idea is that people are not reassigning their gender or sex. They're simply undergoing treatment to have their bodies reflect their internal gender identity. Ultimately, it's a transition to have what someone can see on the outside reflect what people are on the inside. Transitioning is a term that reflects someone who is undergoing changes to live as their true gender identity. It may mean treatment to allow their body to be in harmony with their gender identity, and may mean steps like name changes, different clothing, legal document changes, and different people choose different ways to transition. Finally, a word about pronouns. Pronouns are sometimes called preferred pronouns, although more people are dropping the preferred because it's really not a choice. Ultimately, some folks may use different pronouns. They may feel comfortable sharing those pronouns with you, but if not, feel free to use ones like they or them. It's not grammatically incorrect to use them, although people think that they're plural and not really something that they can use, but you can. You can also use gender-neutral pronouns like sie, zim, zir. There are other variations that people may ask you to use, so there's really no one combination of pronouns that everyone agrees upon yet. Often, if you get a pronoun wrong, just acknowledge the mistake and use the correct one. And finally, you can use the person's name if you don't remember what pronouns they use. So I hope this has offered you some definitions to think about. If you have any expanded or altered changes to the definitions we've talked about today, feel free to comment below. We'd look forward to hearing from you.